As the Civil War began, Pennsylvania governor and Dickinson Law School graduate Andrew Curtin knew that he would have to defend his capital city at Harrisburg. To do so, he decided to call for volunteers and built various forts around the city. The most famous of these forts, Camp Curtin, also served as a transportation center for the Union Army because of its significant great location.
It was 5 days after the surrender of Fort Sumter and created the largest Civil War training grounds in the United States. Over 300,000 men were trained at Camp Curtin during the 4 years of the war.
Other major forts, such as Fort Washington and Camp Penn, were also built to defend the city from the impending rebel attack. Fort Couch, named for the general in charge of defending Harrisburg, was also created to defend the city.
One fort started over there, Fort Washington, and they started building that one on Monday, June 15th. You know, the pastors on the 14th of June asked everyone in Harrisburg, you better get over our western banks and start fortifying the area to slow up the Confederate advancement. And he went over there and he noticed that there was higher ground roughly 4 or 5 blocks west of Fort Washington, and they called that Fort Couch.
The Union troops had gotten word from spies that rebel forces and top Confederate General Robert E. Lee wanted to bring the battle north and away from key southern cities. To do this, he sent Generals Richard Ewell and Albert Jenkins to the Cumberland Valley to capture Carlisle and Harrisburg. Various times throughout the war, General Couch wrote to President Lincoln about the advancement of the rebel troops.
His Excellency Abraham Lincoln, President. They have not up to this time made any show of attacking force. There are probably 1,500 men in short distance from my front. Darius N. Couch, June 28, 1863, Harrisburg, Pennsylvania.
On June 28, 1863, Confederate General Jenkins led his troops into the city of Mechanicsburg, where he planned on stopping for a day or two en route to taking Harrisburg. He led half of his men to Peace Church, about 3 miles northeast of Mechanicsburg, where they exchanged fire with Union troops. Later, Jenkins used the Peace Church area as a camp to set up his artillery. Later, Jenkins and his cavalry opened fire on Union fighters, scattering them in all directions.
But at first, you know, it was General Jenkins and his 1,200 men in the area of Mechanicsburg and present-day Hampton Township was there to support Ewell in the invasion of Harrisburg. Basically, it should have been the Battle of Harrisburg, not the Battle of Gettysburg. Gettysburg was basically a shopping trip gone bad, as I tell people, and they had to return to Gettysburg to help out Lee.
On the evening of June 30th, 1863, Jenkins received word from General Robert E. Lee that he should abandon his attempts to take the Pennsylvania capital. Instead, Jenkins was ordered to head south, to where tens of thousands of Union and Confederate troops were massing in preparation for the fateful Battle of Gettysburg soon to commence. Upon learning that Southern rebels were retreating from Mechanicsburg, members of New York's 22nd Militia journeyed to an area known as Sporting Hill. There they were fired upon at long range by hidden Southern troops. The militia soon determined that the firing was coming from a stone barn known as McCormick's Barn. Further down the pike, they could see Southern troops fleeing into Glime's Woods. The 22nd Militia sent a number of their men directly into these woods to prevent the rebels from taking cover. The two sides remained stalemated until cannon fire hit McCormick's Barn, where the rebels were hiding. The shot drove the Confederate troops further into Glime's Woods, where the Union troops were waiting.
It's called Battle of Sporting Hill, but really it was a skirmish, a big skirmish. But what's important, it did happen, and it wasn't just a couple dozen guys. It lasted for a while. And it was the northernmost action in the Gettysburg camp. It basically went from 3:30 to 6 o'clock. And there was 16 Confederates killed, about 30 wounded, and somewhere around 20 Union wounded.
The Battle of Sporting Hill was just a precursor of what was to come several days later at Gettysburg, where the tide of the war would turn finally and decisively in the Union's favor.